Hashem, Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Avodah Zarah Daf Yud Beis, Avodah Zarah 12, and we're going to start at the Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Aleph from the Beis and the bottom of 11b. Today's Daf is dedicated for a Shmir for the Chayalim, Hatzal for the Shvuyim, and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael. It says the Mishnah an Ir Sheyesh Ba'avodas Kochavim. Let's say you have a city in which has idolatry in it, meaning to say they have their day of their festival. And let's say that Tuesday, for example, that's the day where everybody in the city celebrates their holiday. Chutzawa mutar. And the cities around it will be permitted. Haya chutzawa avodas kochavim. Tochawa mutar. But if the outside cities were where the idolaters were, then the inside city is permitted. Meaning, say if the idolatry day was in the suburbs, then outside is prohibited, but inside is permitted. What about to travel there? So it would meaning to say, are you allowed to go Rashi says, are you allowed to go to the city which is worshiping their festival that day to talk to one of the people from the city? So would you be allowed to go there? So in a time where there's no way to go out from that city to go to another city, so then it's going to be prohibited to go there. And the reason is out of the chashad, that it looks like he's going to worship idolatry. Welcome back, Harold. Welcome back. But if he's able to go into that city, there's the Gemara right there, and we're on the bottom of 11b. If he be able to go to that city to another city, then we're going to say it's mutar. Meaning to say, if it's not clear that he's going into that city, but he could possibly be going to another city, then it's going to be an issue, and it's not going to be an issue, and it's permitted to go there. We're 3 lines from the bottom on 11b. So the Gemara says, what does it mean that we said that the city itself is prohibited to go into it on the day of the holiday, and to do business with them, but outside that city is going to be permitted. So what's considered to be outside the city where it's permitted to do business with them on the day of their holiday? What's considered outside that city? Atluza was, Rashi says, it's like the word itlaz, which is with an aleph. So it's a marketplace where they sell meat, and it's like the meat market of Aza. She says Aza is the city of the Philistines, and there was idolatry there, and there was this meat market outside it that was next to it. So that distance is like the city and the suburbs are permitted. The Ikadamri by Mine, so others have a different version of this conversation. And Bamine Reish Lakish me Rebbe Chanina Atluza Shel Aza Mahu says, what's going to be the law with the marketplace of Aza? Is it going to be permitted to do business with them on the day of that festival outside, where there's a festival in Aza? Are you allowed to do business in the meat market outside? So the response from Rebbe Chanina was, haven't you ever gone to Tzur? That's a city where the Jews and the idolaters live together. And didn't you see there that there were Jews and idolaters? 12a at the top, that they put their two pots next to each other on the same stove. And the Chachamim did not object. Even though they were right next to each other, the prohibited pot of the idolaters next to the permitted pot of the Jews, the rabbis did not object. And so too in our case, even though the people of the city are prohibited, nevertheless, the ones right next to it, the meat marketplace, is going to be permitted, and so it's not a concern. So the Gemara says, what does it mean, lo chashu em chachamim? What does it mean that the rabbis weren't concerned with the two pots that were next to each other? What would have been their concern? And we're saying that they weren't concerned. And also here by the city, the suburb next to the city, the rabbis are saying they're not concerned. So we're going to see three answers. Amar Abaye, number one, Mishum Basar Nevela. The rabbis weren't concerned about actual biblical prohibition of non-kosher meat being put into the Jewish pot. Oh, Amrina, we weren't concerned that maybe the Jew would stick his face in the other direction. And the idolater would throw the meat into the Jew's pot. And so to our case, the rabbis weren't concerned here about the money of the idolaters, that they somehow the actual money of idolatry ended up outside of the city, and it was actually biblically prohibited to have benefit from it. And the rabbis weren't concerned about this because so the rabbis weren't concerned about it. And so for sure, in a case where it was just a rabbinic prohibition of the doing business with them on the day of their holiday, the rabbis weren't also concerned, but they weren't even concerned about a biblical prohibition. Rava says, Rava says, what does it mean when the rabbis weren't concerned in Sur? Mishum Bishuay of the Kochavim. They weren't concerned is not about the biblical prohibition, but rather they were not concerned about a rabbinic prohibition, which was Bishul Akum. So meaning to say that if a non-Jew cooks, if an idolater cooks the food of the Jew, that's rabbinically prohibited because of being cooked from the idolater. And so too, here too, if there was no concern about a biblical prohibition, let's say you took the money yourself and you wanted to buy something from the idolater, and then there would be a rabbinic prohibition about doing business with them on the day of their holiday, the rabbis weren't concerned if it was not the place where that was the holiday itself, but it was just next to it. The stages weren't concerned. And Rabbi Baruch gives a third interpretation. Says, no, the rabbis weren't concerned not about a rabbinic prohibition, but they weren't concerned about basically the takana, something even less than rabbinic prohibition, that something would splatter from the pot of the idolater onto the pot of the Jew. And so too, what's the concern? The rabbis were not concerned about doing business outside of the city in the suburbs 3 days before the holiday, which is the concern in the city itself. But on the day of the holiday, then the rabbis went to let you do business outside the city. So those are the three explanations. What does it mean? Since we weren't concerned about Sur, we're not concerned about the suburbs outside the city of the idolatry. Are you allowed to go into that city itself on the day of their holiday? The rabbis taught a city that has idolatry in it, also you're not allowed to go into it on the day of their holiday, because there's a concern, Rashi says, that maybe he's also going to worship. And you can't go from it to another city. Meaning to say, even if it's not 100% certain that you're going into that city to worship, because there's another path, you're still not going to be allowed. If the only road leads to that city, then you can't go in because there's concern you're going to be worshiping there. But if it's people will think you're worshiping. But if there's multiple roads, meaning to say multiple destinations on that road, then it's not going to be prohibited. So because then people could say you're going to a different place, you're not going to that city to worship. Yosh, so now Gemara is going to say also about, since we start talking about the problem of chashad, that you have to be careful that people don't suspect you of committing a sin. Yoshev coats b'fnei avodas kochavim. Let's say he got a thorn in his body in front of the idolatry. Well, Yishlev Yitlena, you shouldn't bend over in front of the idolatry and remove him. Because it appears like you're bowing down to the idolatry. But if it doesn't look that way, then it's permitted, mutter. Let's say he drops some money before the idolater. Well, let's say he drops some money in front of the idolatry. He shouldn't bend down and pick him up because it looks like he's bowing down to idolatry. But if it doesn't look that way, mutter, it's permitted. Next case, third case, if there's a spring that's gushing water in front of the idolatry, he shouldn't bend down and drink him. Looks like he's bowing down to the idolatry. But if it doesn't appear that way, mutter, it's permitted. Fourth case, so let's say you have these faces of like these molds of faces, like these casts, and you put a pipe of water through the back, and then the people basically kind of like a water fountain. The water would come out to the people to drink it through it. So then, under those circumstances, person should not put his mouth on their mouths and drink because it looks like he's kissing the idolatry. So too, a person should not put his mouth onto a silon, that's a pipe that's attached to the ground, and drink because it looks like he's doesn't say why, but it says not because it looks like he's worshiping idolatry, because of dangerous. What does it mean? The Gemara says that that he's not allowed to bend down in front of the idolatry to pick out his thorn because it looks like he's bowing down to idolatry. But if it doesn't look that way, it's permitted. What does that mean? What does that mean? If you want to say that nobody can see him, wherever something is prohibited because it looks bad, then even inside private, you're not allowed to do it. What's the concept for that? What's the reason why, if something is only prohibited because people look at it, might misunderstand it, then even in private, it's going to be prohibited. So the Ran explains that Chachamim were concerned that if they're going to allow it to you in the private room, then he'll come to do it outside, and he'll say nobody can see me here. And a second concern is people will see him even though he's in a private room. That's what the Ran says. So anyway, if that's the case, even in private should be prohibited. So what does it mean if people can't see him? So rather, he can take out the thorn if it doesn't look like he's bowing down to idolatry when he takes it out. And we need all four cases. The Itana codes, if we only have the case of the thorn, we have to learn that that's prohibited. Mishum de Afshar Mezel Kamei Umishkule. You might have said that you're allowed to take out if it doesn't look like you're bowing down to idolatry, because you could have gone a little bit farther and removed it. Avamos, but money, the low Afshar, money, you can't. You have to pick it up where it is. This is you can't pick up the money where it's not. You only have to go where the money is. There's the old joke about that house. You ever hear that joke about the guys searching for his money under the lamppost. And he says, well, this is where the light is. You're not going to find the money where the light is. You're going to find the money where the money is. So therefore, you might have drawn a distinction and say that the money you could do it, but not the thorn. The tanamos. And if you just said the case of the money, the mamona, there maybe we're going to be strict because it's money. It's just, what's the big deal of our coats? But a thorn, the tzara, where you're in distress, aim alone. You might have said that you don't have to that you're allowed to remove it because you're in tremendous pain. And if we just had these two cases, mishum deleka sakana, there's no danger there. And avomayan, but in the case of a spring, these ika sakana, if you don't drink from the water, it's dangerous. You're going to die from thirst. Well, you might have thought that under those circumstances, it doesn't apply. So therefore, it's shich. We need all three cases. And partsufos. And why do we have the case of the mold where the water came through? Why do we have it? Because the reason is because the Tana wanted to say afterwards, because the Tana wanted to teach us the law. You shouldn't stick your mouth on the pipe in the water because it's dangerous. What's the danger? Aluka. The danger is this animal, which is called a leech, which is found in these places, and then it'll get into you, and it could be very dangerous. A person is not allowed to drink water from the rivers or the swamps, now not straight with his mouth or with one hand. And if he does drink that way, he's really responsible. He's committing a sin because he's endangering his life in Mea Sakana because it's dangerous. My Sakana, what's the danger? Sakana Saluka, danger of leeches. And Messiah Reb Chanina, Damar Reb Chanina, Bolea Nema Shamayim, a person swallows a leech. Mutar Hachim Ochamim b'Shabbos. You're even allowed to warm him up to hot water on Shabbos. So Maisis Shebecha Shebo Nema Shamayim. There's one person who swallowed up a leech. V'iter Rabbi Nechemia Hachim Ochamim b'Shabbos. Rabbi Nechemia allowed him to warm up the water on Shabbos. But until they warmed the water, Rav Huna B'Rei Yeshua told him to drink some vinegar to stop the effects of the leech. And Amar Avidi Bar Abin Haiman Depos the Bura Michai, a person who, God forbid, swallows a bee, a live bee, lo chaye. He's not going to live long. And we saw a tragic case in the news, a very public case 2 weeks ago in England. The Prince of England, Prince William, he was playing polo with his friend, and his friend, who was a billionaire, he swallowed a bee and he died within moments. And they couldn't even though there was a lot of medical staff there, they couldn't save him because if the bee stings you inside your mouth and basically your throat swells up, you're done. And so they said, but Shamgaz. But anyway, at least give him a little bit of strong vinegar to drink. It's not going to save him, but afshar will allow him to live long enough to put his affairs in order and tell his family how to divide up his money. Person should not drink wine at night. A person should not drink water at night. You can't see what's in the water. But they're going to say it's because of demons. But also, like from a medical perspective, they had still water. The water was sitting there. You don't know what bacteria gets in it. So a person shouldn't drink the water at night. What's the danger? Sakana shavriri. It's the danger of this demon that is called Shriri. That Rashi says he's the demon that's in charge of blindness. If you drink it, what's the solution? If there's somebody with him, then the demons, we know from other Gemaras, from Gemara and Brachos, that the demon does not strike when there's two people. So if there's another person with him, Yatre, then under those circumstances, what he should do is maya. He should wake him up and say, "Go get me some water to drink." Uh, so, but if there is no other person there, then basically he should bang the cover of the jug on the jug, so it looks like there's somebody else with him. Basically, he bangs the cover onto the jug, so it sounds like there's another person there. The name of Iu and Polanya Bar Polanisa, and he should say to himself, basically his name, Amrala Imech, your mother told you is dire, Mi Shavriri, Bariri, Riri, Yuri. This is basically like a mantra to say to ward off the demon. And Re, Bikase, Chivara. And that is found in this demon is found in these new pottery cups, and when the demon hears his name Shavriri, he'll run away, and then he'll be allowed to drink from the water. Okay, it says the Mishnah. Let's say you have a city that has idolatry in it, and it has shops that are adorned, and also there are also shops that don't have adornment. We see this today. There are some shops have Christmas lights and some don't, right? Some shops get adorned for the holidays, some don't. This was an incident in Beit Shan. He says the cities that were adorned are the shops that were adorned are prohibited, but the ones that are not adorned are permitted. And Rashi explains that those shops that don't have the adornments, they don't take from it basically the tribute to the idolatry. And so therefore the idolatry is not getting any benefit from those shops. And so that's one possibility. Another possibility Rashi suggests is the reason for the prohibition is that basically you wouldn't be allowed to sell to them because maybe you're going to sell him an animal and he'll go and offer it to idolatry, or else it'll go and give praise. So that's another concern, but that doesn't that's not relevant to the adornments. But it's only the case where it's adorned does Rashi say that there's a problem, because they're going to take a portion of that money and give it over. The Pharisee Israel asked the question, didn't we just say you're not allowed to go into a city where there's a holiday taking place? If that's the case, how are the Jewish people in that city at all? So the Pharisee Israel says we're talking about the shops that are outside the city. And nevertheless, even though it's outside the city, those shops are adorned, they're prohibited because they're going to give it to idolatry. So again, so just to clarify, so Rashi says that the prohibition here is not because of the idea that you're going to do business with them on the day of their holiday, because we know you're not allowed to do business 3 days, for sure on the day of the holiday, but that's only prohibited to specifically to sell to them. Because what's the reason? Because that he's going to go and bring it as an idolatry, and you're in violation of Lifnei Iver, or else he's going to go and give praise. But to purchase from them is not prohibited. That's what it's talking about 3 days before. And so now there's a different concern. And here the concern is purchasing from them, and that's the concern that he's going to go and give a tribute to the to the to his idol. So therefore, you can't. That's only concern if it's the type of store that gives a tribute. Okay, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem, we'll go upstairs to daven at this time. Shkoyach. If anybody has any questions, happy to take the question.